Hi, welcome to your strategy room. In this video, I'm going to define value. Within the context of our fight against entropy, the definition of, particularly the universal definition of the word value, is extremely important. Particularly in my 20 years in the corporate world, I came to the conclusion that this word is being misused and sometimes out of context, and it's not truly understood. Hopefully in this video we'll clarify that. The way the investment world defines value is so much more different than how we define the value coming from operational background. So for example, a grocery store around the corner, the definition of value is vastly different from in an ordinary private equity firm. But why is that? Why does it have to be that way? There must be a universal definition of value that's applicable to everybody and it can be understood by everyone. When I was writing my first book, The Fight Against Entropy, Entrepreneurial Value and Strategy, I really had to dig into the definition of the word value, because what I realized was it's at the center of how we fight against entropy. So I wanted to share my findings. As I explained it in my book, that my definition of the word value is that everything that we do against the spontaneous flow of nature. Now, the spontaneous flow of nature is a fancy way of saying entropy. The best way to think about this, we take any systems in place and we leave that system alone. That system goes from an organized state to a disorganized state. And entropy causes this happen. And this process happens at an irreversible, spontaneous flow. And the value is that everything that we do against that flow. And I know you are thinking right now in terms of supply and demand dynamics. While it is true, but those dynamics, they kick in as the secondary definition of value. And when we talk about the entrepreneurial value definition, the supply and demand curve aspect will come into play. But first, this is one step before the supply and demand dynamics. We have to put something together, a system or an object or a thought or whatever it might be, against the irreversible and spontaneous flow of nature. So anything that we do against that is valuable. So let's attach some examples to our new definition of value. The best example is a cup of coffee. A cup of coffee is valuable. Now, again, I know you're automatically thinking about the supply and demand curves. You're thinking about a Starbucks or some place that you pay money for. This is one step before the monetary unit of measure. Now, think about a cup of coffee and what's involved making it. Our cup of coffee doesn't come to being naturally or spontaneously. So we have to engage in actions that are contrary to irreversible spontaneous flow of nature to put together a cup of coffee. And much more importantly, we have to use compact and useful energy to put together a cup of coffee. Putting together useful and compact forms of energy against the spontaneous flow of nature will make that cup of coffee valuable as far as our definition is concerned. Let's take another example from entrepreneurial world. Putting together a venture, starting something as a system that's going to be in the future from entrepreneurial point of view, and allocating useful and compact energy to that particular outcome is valuable. So at the end of the day, an entrepreneur will not only want to make valuable products as systems, but the venture itself needs to be valuable. So, within the context of our fight against entropy, we have to accumulate useful and compact energy and then put together a system that's in the future. And our purpose is to make valuable system or systems. So that requires us to understand uh, some other definitions in terms of our strategy as to how to make that valuable system come to being, and entrepreneurial value generation systems. And that brings up the entrepreneurial value definition, which is the second step after we define the value. It means that we did something against the spontaneous flow of nature. Now the supply and demand curves can put in. So, for example, a bottle of water will require X amount of energy to put together. And that bottle of water, the price of that bottle of water will fluctuate based on supply and demand dynamics that we're all familiar with. But the key here is having something put together against the spontaneous flow of nature, in this case, the entropy. And here is why this definition is universal. As you can see from the examples, a cup of coffee, a venture that at first look doesn't look even comparable, and a bottle of water, all these three things have this thing in common, which is in order for them to become valuable, we had to spend compact and useful energy to form them, and we have to maintain them. And before we even start putting them, we have to explore them. And all of these are activities and engagements that we do against the flow of nature, namely against entropy. So I'm going to continue to uh, make videos with the definitions such as this one. So the next is going to be tridexterity, the definition of the word strategy, and many, many more videos will come. Don't forget to subscribe. And more importantly, don't forget to join the discussion in my YouTube community, so that I can answer all of your questions, all of your comments, and then we can engage in a constructive discussions. See you in the next video.